The San Francisco 49ers might be the best team in the NFL. Cut that, let me use another one. San Francisco 49ers are the best team in the NFL. They are currently 11-3 and have a very good chance of winning the NFC. So in today's video, I want to talk all about the San Francisco 49ers. And the way I'm going to do this is going to be talking about them in 3 different segments. Segment number 1 is going to be the pros and cons of this current 49ers roster. Segment number 2, we're going to talk about the immediate future and the long-term future of the San Francisco 49ers. And lastly, segment number 3, which is going to be the bulk of the video, we are going to talk about ways the Niners can potentially lose in the playoffs. So with that being said, let's just hop right into it. And as I said earlier, let's go ahead and start off with segment number 1, which is going to be the pros and cons. And we're going to begin with the pros because there's a ton of them. In fact, there's so many that I just decided to kind of concise them into 4 different groups. Your number 1 pro, you have stars everywhere. Offensively, Brock Purdy, Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, George Kittle, Kyle Juszczyk, Trent Williams. And then defensively, Chase Young, Eric Armstead, Javon Hargrave, Nick Bosa, Dre Greenlaw, Fred Warner, Travarius Ward, and Diomandre Lenoir. Okay, I don't think I have to say anything about that. Those are their stars. Pro number 2, Kyle Shanahan. He's maybe the best offensive mind in the entire NFL, and his game plans are elite. Pro number 3, and kind of going back to the stars everywhere category, their defensive front 7, which is their defensive line and their linebacking group, is ridiculous. Again, to just go back over the names, Nick Bosa, Javon Hargrave, Eric Armstead, Chase Young, Dre Greenlaw, and Fred Warner. And you look at the depth along the defensive line, Clelin Ferrell, Kevin Givens, Javon Kinlaw, Randy Gregory. This is a front 4 that can get pressure on everybody, and they're also really good in run stuffing. And when Nick Bosa and Chase Young get tired, you just throw in their backups and they're just as good. They have, in my opinion, the best linebacking core with the best linebacker in the entire NFL, Fred Warner, and of course, Dre Greenlaw. This defense is ridiculous, and they have a great defensive coordinator in Steven Wilks. And the last pro of this team, again, I try to concise everything in a little small package here, Brock Purdy. The arguable frontrunner for the MVP award, Brock Purdy is a very good quarterback. Anyone who says he's a top 5 quarterback, slow your race a little bit. He's definitely a top 10 quarterback surrounded by great talent. But that's what's so great about Brock Purdy. He doesn't necessarily have to be this incredible quarterback. He doesn't have to be Patrick Mahomes or Josh Allen or Joe Burrow, because he already has the talent and the game plan for him to just go out there and execute at a high level. And Brock Purdy does that very well and consistently at that. He throws with great anticipation. He has great accuracy. He can throw anywhere across the field. And one of the most important things for a quarterback to do, he takes care of the football. Again, it's pretty easy when you have guys like Kyle Shanahan, Christian McCaffrey, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Kyle Juszczyk, George Kittle, Trent Williams protected you. It goes a long way to help him out. And while me personally, I don't think he should win the MVP because it is called the most valuable player, he's still extremely valuable to this team. And the good thing for the 49ers is he might be the best quarterback in the NFC right now. I still think it's Dak Prescott and Matthew Stafford who are slightly above him, but Brock Purdy's right there with them. So those are their pros. Now we go to their cons, and to be honest with you, I'm kind of picking at straws here. The number 1 con, their depth is just kind of okay. Their backup receivers are Ronnie Bell, Chris Conley, and Ray McCloud. They don't really have a ton of offensive line depth, so if they do have an injury across their front 5, it might be an issue. And while the defensive line has a ton of depth, they don't really have that same depth in the secondary and in the linebacking room. That being said, I do like Isaiah Oliver, Logan Ryan, and Ambry Thomas, so you get my point. Again, picking at straws here. Their next big con is that Kyle Shanahan is 0-36 when down by 8+ points in the 4th quarter, and honestly, that statistic is just crazy. The good news for the 49ers is you're never going to be down 8+ points because of how loaded your roster is. But with that being said, it is still a concern and we still have to take it into account. This team has to play from ahead, and if they get behind, especially in that 4th quarter, could get things a little bit interesting. Their next con, and this is something that played out this year, is how great is Brock Purdy going to be when there's injuries on this offense? They were 0-3 when Trent Williams and Deebo Samuel came back, and I'm pretty sure they're undefeated outside of those games. Now the good news for the 49ers is this has been one of the healthiest teams of the entire season. If this team can remain healthy throughout the playoffs and through the rest of the regular season, it's going to be very hard to have Brock Purdy play bad. And the last con, and again, these are all extremely nitpicky here, you're going to have to pay these players, which will nicely transition us to segment number 2, which is going to be talking about the future. Now, when looking at the 2024 unrestricted free agents for the San Francisco 49ers, there's not a whole lot that I would actually bring back, to be honest with you. The most notable names that are going to be gone are going to be Chase Young, Sam Darnold, Tashawn Gibson, and Javon Kinlaw, but you're more than likely going to bring back Sam Darnold for depth, and maybe Chase Young if he's willing to take a smaller deal. But that being said, I think most of the players in this upcoming free agency class are extremely replaceable. Most of the guys who are going to be available are just kind of depth guys, and like I said earlier, the depth isn't already that great. But then things get really interesting coming up in 2025. There are a couple really notable names coming up for them. Eric Armstead, Travarius Ward, Dre Greenlaw, Isaiah Oliver, Brandon Ayuk, Colton McKivitz, and then Talanoa Hufanga. Those are a lot of starters for this team, and they're going to have to find either replacements for them or they're going to have to spend some serious cash. Of those guys who are going to be available, the ones that I think you have to pay are going to be Talanoa Hufanga, Brandon Ayuk, Dre Greenlaw, and Travarius Chris Ward. It would obviously suck losing a guy like Eric Armstead and Isaiah Oliver and some of these other guys, but I do think that those guys are probably a little bit more replaceable. At the end of the day, losing Eric Armstead would suck, but you do have a ton of talent already along the defense. And then you look at guys like Lenore and Colton McKivitz, who you're probably going to end up losing, and it's just kind of one of those things that you just kind of have to do, especially when you have so much talent. And then things get even more interesting in 2026 when you have to pay some very good players. Brock Purdy, Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, Drake Jackson, and Kyle Juszczyk. Now, these guys aren't all going to be available at the same time. I guarantee you they're going to give contract extensions to guys like Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, and Christian McCaffrey before that season comes up. And that also does apply to the guys I was talking about earlier. So I would imagine that some of these guys are going to return who I didn't mention, but they're going to have to start working on those contracts probably this upcoming offseason. Don't be surprised if you hear Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, and Christian McCaffrey's names being brought up for future contract extensions. Now, of the players who are going to more than likely be available in 2026, I do think there's a couple very interesting names that we should talk about. Christian McCaffrey, he's going to be up there in age, and as a running back, your lifespan is extremely short. So is the 49ers going to stay loyal and give him a massive contract? I don't know. Those same principles can also be said about a guy in George Kittle. The next is going to be Brock Purdy, and if he keeps up this level of play, you're going to have to pay him a fuck ton of money. And it's going to be very interesting to see if Brock Purdy can maintain this level of success, especially if they lose a couple of these main guys. Lastly, in 2027, you kind of have the leftovers of all the guys I've already talked about: Trent Williams, Javon Hargrave, Fred Warner, Randy Gregory, Jake Brendel, Jake Moody, those type of guys. I'm not going to predict that far out, but I guarantee you a lot of those guys are going to get massive contracts. Trent Williams might retire a little bit earlier than his contract expires, and keep an eye out for Javon Hargrave as well. So they're going to have to find some replacements for these upcoming guys who they may not be able to pay. So while I'm not going to predict what contracts they're going to give out and this and that, we'll do that in the offseason more than likely. It is something that we do need to keep our eyes on, especially as the free agency market starts to open up. But now, to kind of end the video off, we're going to go into segment number 3, which is going to be, how can the 49ers not win a Super Bowl this year? What are the ways that they could lose? Because right now, this team looks incredible. I've been saying it in all my videos as of late, this is the Thanos of the NFL. And for me, the only way this team can lose is if somehow the Avengers come together. So let's talk about what it would take for this Niners team to lose, and I think there's 3 ways that this could happen. The number 1 way this team could lose: injuries. It's quite simple. Again, this team has been very healthy the entire season. Sure, they've had their small little hiccups here and there, but for the most part, very healthy. But how can this team perform in the playoffs without a couple of their stars if they are to miss some time? Because like I said earlier, 0-3 without Trent Williams and Deebo Samuel. If one of those guys is to miss some certain games, it could get very interesting for this Niners team. And of course, if all the players that you do not want to get injured, the 2 biggest ones in my opinion are Fred Warner and Brock Purdy. If those guys miss some time, especially Brock Purdy, it's going to be bad. Now the good news is this: you have Dre Greenlaw to replace a guy in Fred Warner, and you have Sam Darnold, who's a competent quarterback. So it would be interesting if this team was to start to face a little bit of injuries. The next way they can lose, and I think this is very unrealistic, but I think of all the teams in the NFC that could potentially beat the San Francisco 49ers, the Los Angeles Rams. Now I know that might sound a little bit crazy, but of all the games the 49ers have been in, the one team that was competent that gave them a hard time were the Rams. I know they have 3 losses, but I just don't really talk about those because they weren't 100% healthy. But in all the games that they've been healthy, the one team that gave them a run for their money in the NFC, the Los Angeles Rams. The Cowboys got smoked by them, the Eagles got smoked by them, the one team that was not smoked by them, the LA Rams. And there's a couple reasons why I think the Rams could give the Niners a run for their money. Matthew Stafford is a gunslinger who's won a Super Bowl and has a ton of experience. They have some really good receivers in Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, and Tutu Atwell. Their defensive line is really starting to develop into a very nice front, and they have Sean McVay and Raheem Morris. Now, the one con this team does have is a little bit of some inexperience in the secondary, and they also don't have the best offensive line in the world. But if McVay and Morris can cook up a great game plan, I could see them taking it to the Niners team. What's the chances they beat the Niners? Not very high, but I think of all the teams in the NFC that could give this team a hard time, it would be the Rams. And the last way that I can see the Niners losing in the playoffs is going to be against the Dallas Cowboys, and only under one condition. That condition being the Cowboys can play from ahead. If Dallas can play from ahead, especially going into that 4th quarter, I think Dallas has a great chance. But with that being said, Dallas has already had 3 opportunities against the San Francisco 49ers, one this year. And in the last 2, they got beat by the Niners in the playoffs, and this most recent year, they got obliterated. So of course, I think this is extremely unlikely, but I think if Dallas can play from ahead, which is their specialty, and San Francisco can play from behind, which is not their specialty, that might be a recipe for disaster for the San Francisco 49ers. Now, to add to the unlikeliness of this happening is the fact that the San Francisco 49ers are great at home, and Dallas is horrible in away games. So again, we're speaking from an unlikely standpoint, but I could definitely see it happening if Dallas can somehow get the ball first, go out there and score, and San Francisco gets the ball and has a turnover or doesn't put up points, and then Dallas can go down there and score again. If Dallas can grow a lead and Dak Prescott plays great football and Mike McCarthy calls up a great game plan, I'm just saying it's possible. Now, if we're coming back down to earth from that hypothetical sentence, what's the likelihood of that happening? I would say probably like a less than 10% chance of happening, but that's just because the San Francisco 49ers start games so well and they have such discipline on both offense and defense. But I've also seen crazier things in this world. At the end of the day, if you look at every single team in the NFC, there's only two teams that match up to the level of talent that San Francisco has, and that's Dallas and the Philadelphia Eagles, which we all know that San Francisco absolutely destroyed both those teams. But Dallas has the personnel to match San Francisco, and I think they have some coaches who know what they're doing. Philadelphia, I think, doesn't really stand a chance because I don't think they have the coaching staff to match up San Francisco, nor the defensive talent, unlike Dallas. So from a kind of unrealistic standpoint, the only two teams in the NFC that I think stand even a remote chance against San Francisco are the LA Rams and the Dallas Cowboys. And despite the fact that Dallas blew out the LA Rams, I actually think the LA Rams stand a better chance against the Niners than the Cowboys do. What's the percentage of the LA Rams beating them? Probably like less than 10%, maybe 15%. Same thing kind of goes for Dallas. Now tonight, we have the Ravens versus the 49ers in a game where I think 49ers fans are going to be very happy. I think the Niners are going to win, and I think it's going to be kind of a blowout. But I've been wrong before, and I've been wrong many times. So Niners fans, you guys tell me what I got right and wrong in the comment section below. And NFL fans, you guys do the exact same thing. What do you guys think of this Niners team, and do you guys think my synopsis on them was correct? And if you did enjoy the video, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button because that would help me out a ton. But I love you guys. Peace.